Back in the Mallard. What's an OPC? Refuelling from Bowsers. Forced landings? Where would you land? And cabin and baggage doors opening in flight. What would you do? I'm going to discuss all this and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Standby star 9000, 1013, Kilo 25. Coordinating aileron and rudder, bank, balance, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. $3 runway 29 1631.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 121 of Flight Training Australia. All around Australia and the world, in the USA, UK, New Zealand, Japan, Germany, Hong Kong and Switzerland, just to name a few. This is the podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host, Trent Robinson. Welcome to another episode. No matter where in the world you're listening, welcome and thank you for joining me. It really is fantastic, the reach that we're starting to get globally, listeners everywhere. So welcome again. Thank you for listening and send me a message. Let me know where you are, where you're listening from, and love to have a chat. So big week. We had a forced landing on the beach the other day. All went very well. Fuel issue maybe, engine just lost power, and the pilot did a great job getting the aircraft down on the beach. Darwin Airport is quite lucky in some aspects that on the northern shores of the airport is quite a long, large beach area. We have very high tides here in Darwin, so the sand is quite firm and compact. And luckily the tide was out. We had a full moon king tide about 3 days earlier, so it was a good thing. And luckily, they could get things sorted and got the aircraft out safely. So we'll wait for the report on that one to see what was the cause. But at the end of the day, it only matters from a learning point of view, but it was a successful landing and everyone got away okay. And that is the most important thing ultimately. So well done there. I will come back to the topic of forced landings and things later on. But before that, you would have seen on Instagram and Facebook, I've been back in the Mallard this week. Just love it. Had a great time. Such a beautiful, special aeroplane. For those that aren't really familiar, Pasquale Pearls up here operate 3 G73 Grumman Mallards. They are the Australian turbine variant. Very similar to the Frakes models, which there's a couple floating around, but this has been modified for Australian conditions, built in Australia. It is a certified 2-crew operational aircraft, so it can only be flown 2 crew. So we need to have ATPL as a Part 121 operation. It's about 6.35 tonne max takeoff weight. Multi-crew aircraft, ATPL is what we have for licensing to operate that aircraft. And there's only 3 of them in the world of this Australian variety. So very, very special. And I and the others that fly it are truly honoured and privileged to do so. And look, just so much fun. Very serious operation, of course, but just so much fun. Landing on the water, opening the back baggage door or the main entry door and just having water outside the door. And it's okay because you haven't just ditched. It's great. And I know I keep saying that, but it's just part of that amazing feeling of doing it and the satisfaction of having a good landing and takeoff on the water. So that was my first one back in about 3 months. And the pearling season is just getting going. So another flight next month, and then in June I'll be flying every Monday. So people do keep asking, what's the deal there? Do I fly it for fun? So, well, I guess you could say yes, but it's a contract pay position. I'm a first officer going through my line training on it, and I'm also performing capacity for doing flight testing as far as IPCs, instrument proficiency checks and instructor checks go. I've got a bit of a way to go yet before I'm sort of truly proficient on the water to be of any value as an instructor in that capacity. So I'm not doing any Mallard training per se, but it's all the other stuff that I'll be doing. But it's just fantastic to be part of that team and be involved with it. It's an amazing aeroplane. And you'll see some more footage and photos and things of that coming up as I go flying with Dan and Chad and Duncan. And keep getting better, improving my landings. So part of that process was doing an OPC, which is a term that doesn't really get bantered around too much in the GA world, but it is one that will start being used more as Part 119 comes into effect for Part 135 operations. And an OPC is an operator proficiency check. And essentially what it is it's an internal flight test, I guess, if you could think about it that way. So it's in between CASA testing. So for instrument flying, if you're an IFR pilot, you'll do an instrument proficiency check every 12 months. And so you will do an OPC every 6 months. So essentially in between that. And it's a chance to just check everything is on target and going well. But it is also a chance to revisit training opportunities for things that you wouldn't necessarily practice often, like all your emergency procedures. And in our case, for the Mallard, slightly different landing methods. We do what's called a stall-to-step landing, which is kind of like a 3-point landing in a tail aeroplane, but then putting it back on its main wheels or onto the step. That's for rough conditions and things. And a little bit of taxi holding practice will come up to a buoy and just using the engines in reverse thrust and beta just to hold position against the tide and the wind. Getting used to maneuvering the aeroplane so don't get blown off and drift away. You'll see when we come up into into Kuri Bay, the docking there that we do, very fine movements of just using thrust, either forward or asymmetric thrust to pull into the dock, and takes a bit of practice. So good to do all those sort of things on an OPC. And for VFR pilots, they do a flight review every 24 months, so every 2 years. So that OPC would be every 12 months. And that's what will sort of start happening for charter operations, like low passenger transport operations. So yeah, that's what an OPC is all about for those of you that asked. All right, what else are we going to talk about? So refueling from Bowsers. Now, this is one, I'm going to do a video on this at some point, but as you know, time is precious. So I'll talk about it first and then I'll cover it in a video later. Doing a lot of the 210 checks and things. So I've been noticing a few things, like I haven't refueled from a Bowser before because the truck usually does it, which is fine. That's why I'm covering it. But some things I've seen people go to do is pretty much nothing much short of dangerous. So I just wanted to run through a few bits and pieces there. Hopefully you have discussed at the very minimum the concept of refueling an aircraft and refueling from Bowsers. It's all part of the syllabus and something that you should be doing if you have the opportunity. But if you have a fuel Bowser at your local airfield and you usually get refueled from a truck, ask your instructor, can we please go to the Bowser? It's a very simple process. It's really not much different from going to the petrol station and filling up your car. But there's a few little hazards that I have identified in recent times that I just think need to be mentioned before someone gets hurt. So one of the first things is the hose. Now, the hose, well, when you go to the refuel, you'll put your card in or your credit card, do a pre-auth or get the card details swiped, and then it goes, yep, great, take your fuel. So you'll set up an earthing cable, and that can clip onto the main gear strut or the exhaust pipe or something like that, cowl flap. We try not to put it on painted surfaces, not because it won't work, but we just don't want to scratch anything, we want to look after the aeroplane, so keep it looking nice and tidy. But when pulling the hose out, it's really important that we typically pull it the whole way out to the furthest wingtip. And we start with the outboard wing first. Now, the reason we do that is just so the hose is set and it's long enough, but also we want to make sure that when that hose is pulled out, usually they're on a recoil. If it's not, and you've got to hand wind it in, then you're generally okay. But if it's on a automatic recoil system, you've got to make sure that that little ratchet locks into place and holds the hose. I've seen people pull it out. It hasn't locked in place properly. They've gone to get up on the ladder and then the hose starts recoiling. And obviously, as it goes, it starts to build up a bit of momentum and it can pull you off the ladder. So please make sure that is locked in place first before you climb up the ladder and start refueling. By the same token, when you finish your refueling and you go to recoil the hose, first things first is you'll go and put the hose, so the nozzle back into the slot like you would your car refueling, and hook it up, and then pull the hose a bit or roll the roller to unlock the latch so that it then starts to wind in. Now, again, it builds up momentum quite quickly, and I've seen people go down to reach with their hand to try and grab the hose and guide it in. Please don't do that. All right. I've seen someone come very, very close to basically grabbing the hose and having their hand pulled through the, let's call it the apparatus, right? But it would not have been pleasant, and could end up in losing a few fingers or dislocating an arm or worse. So don't do that. Use your foot and just guide the hose over the rails so it tries to move left and right as need be, and evenly distribute over the roller. Okay, so please be careful with that sort of thing. When you're moving the ladder, just be careful where the propeller is. You don't then pull the ladder in and knock the prop or the spinner. Basic precautions, and always make sure that you've got fire extinguishers, park brakes off, and passengers are unloaded when dealing with avgas as well. All the basic stuff. All right. But I will do a little video on that sometime soon, just to make the point and share it around with everybody. So if you haven't done it before, go do it. Go check it out. Do it when you're not in a rush, so you can check it all out and do it properly. All right, forced landings. So I based on the beach landing the other day, and there was another landing recently where an aircraft landed on the highway, and this has been happening quite a bit, and it seems to be a bit of a trend or a thing in America of trying to land on highways and freeways and things. And I posted the question and asked everybody what you would do, and the results were rather interesting. So the question I asked was, would you land on a busy freeway? And 74% of you said, yes, I would, which I found quite interesting. So it was over 120 odd votes there. So 74% of you said you would. Now, again, this is just a little Instagram survey, but I'm very curious to know people's thoughts on that. And I did get quite a few messages from people going, if it was clear, maybe, but obviously I said, well, no, busy. And the video I'm referring to was I think it was a Warrior or something that came down and landed on a very busy highway, had overpasses and traffic in multiple lanes, and pretty much landed with a car in front and a car behind. And it's quite interesting watching the aircraft land. And then if I saw that, I'd be pulling over and saying good day and, hey, you're okay. But people just wanted to keep driving and get past them, which I guess is the way of it these days. But more to the point, need to really consider the hazards that a highway or freeway like that present. And I already mentioned some of them with overpass signs, overpasses, power lines, and vehicles is the main thing. The last thing we want to do is potentially get the aircraft down, okay, but take out a car or two or three with us, or cause an accident of people trying to swerve and avoid and have that on our conscience. It'll just be a horrible, horrible thing. The jet that ran out of fuel not that long ago came crashing down onto the highway, bursting into flames. There was a Bonanza in Florida, Miami a few years ago that landed, took out a mother and daughter going to kindergarten in their car. So these are the things that we've got to think about. I've had perfectly good fields or paddocks available, and people have really pushed a situation to try and land on a road that is just not looking favourable at all. Whereas if we landed in the paddock, I couldn't see any reason, if done properly, we wouldn't have just landed and been fine. There is this natural tendency to land on hard stuff because that's what we spend most of our time doing, taking off and landing from bitumen asphalt runways. But just really think about the options that are available to you and mitigate that. The other thing is, I'll use MKT, which is the little airfield that we use south of Darwin. And if we're taking off from runway 25, there's a main road parallel to the runway, and it sort of tapers in towards the upwind leg, which is kind of convenient because if we had an engine failure upwind, we can land on the highway. But quite often, if we do an engine failure after takeoff, pilots will go, yep, I'm going to land here. And I'm like, okay, cool. But what about the truck that's now coming towards us? And they're just acting like it's not there. So make sure you really think about these things, factor it in, and, don't make a relatively controlled situation worse. So just ask you to have a think about that and what you would do in reality, and whether what I've just sort of raised has sort of changed your thought process a little bit now. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. All right, speaking of similar scenarios, there was a tragedy in the States the other day with a Mooney. I can post the link to the video in the episode description so you can have a look. But essentially, the door came open just after takeoff. The pilots sound fairly calm. They requested a turn back, return to land rather than a turn back, and flew downwind. He was just saying, yep, we're going to just land and sort the door, hold my flight plan, all that sort of stuff. And then the aircraft has lost contact on base. And after a brief search, the aircraft was found in what appeared to be a relatively nose-down impact attitude, and both pilot and passenger were killed, sadly. Again, waiting for the crash report to come out, but it would appear that they've tried to slow down, side slip, or perform some sort of maneuver to shut the door, probably slowed down too much, inadvertently stalled and spun the aircraft or similar into the ground, which is just terrible. And I just watched it and listened to the search and the air traffic stuff with the animation that some of them put together. And you just, what a waste. Like, just didn't need to be like that. There's been other instances of similar things. There's videos all through YouTube of this sort of stuff, of nose baggage lockers coming open and then aborting a takeoff and crashing upwind. I know of a storm window, a little side window opening on the aeroplane, someone overreacting, closing the throttle and overrunning the runway, crashing through a fence and severely damaging the aeroplane. They were okay in that instance. But it's just not necessary. If you've flown a 152, I'm pretty much sure that at some point in your training, that damn door is popped open, right? And usually it happens at the worst possible time. And if nothing else, it's just the sudden sort of rush of wind or windy noise. I wouldn't say rush of wind. It's not like a depressurized scene out of a movie. But yeah, it just pops open and it sits there. It's just like if you were to open your car door while driving down the freeway, it's not going to go swinging wide out. You're not going to get sucked out or blown out. It's just going to sit ajar. All right. Baggage door. Sometimes they've got safety catches, which means they pop a little bit, but they'll just hang there. If they don't, then they'll probably open all the way up. Okay. Some things might come out of the locker. Can't do anything about that. But trying to fix it in flight's pretty much impossible. You're going to just have to return to land. And losing control of an aeroplane for something like that is just completely unnecessary. So if you haven't opened a door in flight or had one come open, then talk to your instructor about it. Most airplanes, you can do it safely, pop it open. Some have a door open in flight procedure. Remember, we used to have one in the Mooney. It's a little bit tricky, but it does take a little bit of slipping and sliding. But you do need to monitor your speeds and your control handling of the aeroplane to make sure that you don't have an inadvertent spin or stall situation and lose control of the aeroplane. If it comes to that, you just leave it, deal with the windy noise, come back to the airport, land, close the door if there's no damage, and then get on your way again. All right, but these are the things we need to think about when we're doing takeoff safety briefs. If you have an engine failure before takeoff, we're going to close the throttle. Engine failure after takeoff, we're going to land, notice 30 degrees, all that sort of stuff. But It's not just about engine phase, remember. It's about engine failures, engine fires, engine warning or other warnings. And warnings can be airspeed indicator, fail to read, baggage door pop open, seatbelt outside flapping, just unexpected low power delivery. All sorts of things that could happen that we need to think about and consider, because it only has to happen once for us to incorrectly respond and make a simple situation worse, or in this instance, have catastrophic outcome. All right, so please think about that a little bit more when you do your safety brief. Really think about it. Think about your local area. Don't just do a generic brief. Plan based on the conditions on the day. Darwin at the moment, we've got no TAM situation where half the runway is displaced due to works and maintenance works. So that needs to be factored in. It's not our normal 3.5 kilometre Darwin runway now. Now it's 1,600 metres or so, or it's over 2,000 metres at the moment, but it's going to get shorter again next week. Talking about displaced thresholds as well, how that affects things. Not listening to the NOTAM, reading the NOTAMs, not listening to the ATIS, and landing short of the runway, expecting it to be like it is all the time instead of, hang on a minute, there's all big X's everywhere. And some of you have asked me about the questions or the photos I've posted of that, as well as why they're only X's and don't have the arrows and that sort of stuff. Well, that's because it's a temporary displaced threshold and it's temporary markings. So permanent runways will have the up arrows, or chevron sort of looking arrows, and appropriate markings on the runway bitumen. But because these are temporary markings, then they don't have that. And coming in the other day with the rain and the cloud, it was quite dark. Seeing the displaced threshold, seeing the crosses was a little bit difficult. So situational awareness, being alert, being aware of the situation as well, all part of our briefing, so we know what's going on. We're briefing the conditions and we're as prepared as we can be for any potential outcomes. All right. So hopefully that has all given you some food for thought. I will be back next week. I will be back on Monday. All right. Thank you for your patience these last two, just giving me a bit of time to get sorted. But all going well, we'll be back on Monday, and it's going to be a bit of a big discussion. I'm going to be talking, it's almost a bit of a crisis, mayday. Is this an industry in crisis? Are we in trouble? Are our standards slipping? Why? What's going on? Why is it that I keep talking to people and we're just having so many issues with graduates coming up here and not being able to perform simple tasks? Aircraft accidents slowly starting to increase, it would appear. There's a lot to discuss. I've got a lot of ideas and I want to just lay it out, and then I'm going to be really, really keen on some feedback on that episode. And I'll be also talking to somebody soon where it looks like we're going to get a bunch of head of operations and WHOs and HOFOs together to really think tank and workshop this problem out, because it's not in our heads. It's not because we're being tough and setting too high standards. There is 100% a degrading product, if you want to call it, in the commercial pilot. It's not the same as what it used to be. I've got some theories, and I'm keen to talk about that. So that will be next week. Please join me then. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever player server you're listening to. If you're on Apple, or if you're keen to leave me a review, 5-star review on Spotify or podcast, you can also leave a written review on Apple Podcast. Just sign up on there. I read all those, and I wish there was a way to respond. If there was anyone in Apple or Spotify where, you could leave a review and respond to it, let me know how, or make the feature available, because I do read them, but I just can't contact you in any way to tell you that. Also, Spotify now, if you look on your phone, sometimes there's, what did you think of this episode? Or I might even set a custom question to that particular episode that you've just listened to. And again, I do read all those, but again, I'm sorry, I can't respond to them. So I can post that you've posted it, but I can't respond to it, which is a bit frustrating. But otherwise, message me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or send me an email. And all the details for how to do that are in the episode description. All right, thanks, legends. The only other request I'd put out there is if you're loving what you're hearing and it's of value to you, consider giving up a coffee a month and becoming a Patreon subscriber. Less $5 a month. There's 2 other plans as well, but all that money is raised goes towards the podcast and the YouTube videos. I'm going to be doing some flying soon, which I'll use that to help with fuel money and everything else, and in return give you some fantastic quality products. It's all fully tax deductible. I know some of you have said, well, why should I pay for it? It's all free. Okay, well, that's cool, but this is what helps keep it all going and allows me the time of not doing other revenue raising activities to put into this, and every bit just helps me immensely with the costs involved in putting it all together, and for other stuff that I'm planning to do for you all. I'll be truly grateful. So again, patreon.com/Flight Training Australia. All the details are in the episode description where you can support the show, and I'd love to have you on board. And there are also other special benefits from doing that as well, where you can get more direct access to me and other things I've got planned coming up soon. Looking forward to telling you all about that a bit later. All right, guys, thank you for listening. I've rabbited on long enough. Take care, stay safe, blue skies, and remember the golden rule. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Talk soon. See ya.